Okay, Kyle Hunt from University of Buffalo. Thanks so much for presenting, I guess, some attacker-defender kinds of models today. And go ahead and get started.
Thanks a lot. And thank you very much to your Informs chapter there at OU for organizing all this. I'm a part of our chapter here at UB, so I know it's a lot of work. But from my perspective and from the University of Buffalo ISU department, we really appreciate these efforts. So my name's Kyle. I am a first-year PhD student here at UB. This project is funded by DHS and in collaboration with a couple of folks from the University at Albany. The name of at least this project that I'll be presenting today in this kind of paper, I guess, is Technology Adoption for Airport Security. And in this model, we are looking at the different public disclosure policies that TSA in specific can take, such as disclosing their technology adoption or keeping it a secret. And I'll get into that in more detail. And this is an ongoing project, so the results that I'm sharing today are preliminary results, but the paper and some of the background technical details are still being finalized on our end. So I wish we could all meet in person, but I did make a quick about me slide so I can kind of introduce myself to some of you. I'm sure I don't know many of you on this right now. I am a first-year PhD student. I'm entering my second semester in the fall. I was fortunate enough to be able to take my qualification exam last year, so I kind of am still on track in that sense. Throughout my undergrad education at UB, so about the last 2 years, my research focused on misinformation propagation on social media. I know there's been a couple of talks about that this summer. So I really love that area and got a couple of cool experiences and publications out of that. And I recently changed my concentration more towards the homeland security domain and strategic decision-making, and specifically adversarial deterrence for both TSA and Border Patrol. So basically since about January, I've been working with CBP and TSA on a lot of different efforts. And for me, this is very interesting as opposed to my previous research, because a lot of what we do is not necessarily them telling us do this or do this, but it's motivated by what they would like to be done, which obviously gives us a clear, at least direction and end goal, but there's a lot of room for creativity and research and approach. So to me, that's very fun. So some background for this project, of course, as a lot of us know, at least in this domain, adversaries are very adaptive. So over time, when new policies and policies or affairs, I guess you could say, are put into place by the government, local, federal, state, doesn't matter. A lot of adversaries will adapt to those over time, and they will find ways to circumvent those policies, or in this case, technology, as we'll see, in order to obviously meet their end goal, which is, and a lot of times is to go through the attack, whether that be hurting people, taking money through, obviously online hacking and stuff like that. So yeah, after the 9/11 attacks, the United States developed DHS, Department of Homeland Security, and under the umbrella of DHS is TSA. TSA is who we're working with this year. They are our sponsor for this project, so we work closely with them and update them on what we're doing, and they kind of can redirect or approve the directions that we've been working in. So TSA, as a lot of us know, they are responsible for all the screening protocols, procedures, and the implementations of technology at U.S. airports. Meaning when we go through security checkpoints, they are the guys in blue and the woman in blue who are patting us down, checking our bags, and sitting behind the computer screen trying to find, for the most part, threats to the aviation industry. So the motivation for this project, as far as the practical motivation, of course, new technologies are, for the most part, billions of dollars for the development, the testing, the deployment, and of course, the maintenance, which is ongoing. A couple examples recently are AIT, which are the full body scanners that in some airports we have to go through, and also CT scanners, which are the new X-ray machines that they use to send our checked luggage through. So security agencies, TSA, and other agencies around the world, of course, are especially interested in how to best ensure their short and long-term effectiveness of the technology that they adopt and deploy at airports. So this question is primarily motivated by TSA, but also previous literature in the domain. So a primary question that would like to be answered in this area is whether or not to disclose their adoption strategies. So if they choose to adopt technology and deploy that technology, they would like to know, is it best for us to tell the public that we are doing that, where we're doing that, so on and so forth, or keep that information a secret to the public. So on the right, we actually have a picture of, actually a blurry picture, did not look like that way on my screen, but we have a picture of a recent deployment strategy taken by TSA, where they adopted CT scanners, computed tomography scanners, and they released this information on their website. The link is actually on the screen, so if you go there, you'll see the screen. And so they basically tell you where they deployed it, the airports where they deployed it at, the advantages of the technology, and basically like what it is. So of course, with this information, you can get a lot of details that either an adversary or even a normal person could use in order to try to circumvent that, whether it be a person trying to get drugs through or a terrorist trying to get weapons through. So here we obviously have a lot of information, but of course you can take this information and go online and find a lot more. So CT scanners in specific are obviously used in hospitals for medical diagnoses and scanning purposes. So there's a lot of literature on the reliability of these, the technical reliability of these, and how often there's false negatives, blah, blah, blah. So in that aspect, that's why we are interested in this, to kind of look at the strategic advantages or disadvantages to disclosing such information to the public. And then on the literature side, there's a lot of gaps here. So there is research in secrecy and deception. Deception is obviously basically false disclosure. So it's when you could say, yes, we have 5 targets, we have adopted technology at 1, 2, and 3, although really they may have not done that at all. So that's deception. And you'll see in this work, we're not interested in deception. And there's also a literature in technology adoption in the attacker-defender environment. So there is literature in kind of these two side-by-side areas, but there is no fusion between this, and there's no literature that focuses on information disclosure for technology adoption in general too. So we're looking at airport security in specific, as far as like the baseline data and stuff that we use in this paper and kind of the motivation of it. But of course, we hope that this model will be generalizable across the broader homeland security enterprise. So as I mentioned, there's a good foundation in the literature that motivates this work, and also it does expose indeed the need for this effort. And then, as I said, just another quick redo here. So we are not right now interested in deception, and there's a couple reasons for this. One of those is in practice, they are not interested in it, and also it's not reflective of operational conduct in this domain in the past. And I'll get into that more in a second, actually. So yeah, right here. So here are a few that, not all, definitely not exhaustive, effectively exhaustive at all, but here are a few of the strategic considerations for the agencies as they're adopting and deciding whether or not to disclose. So if they, for instance, do decide to disclose, this may allow adversaries to adapt their attack strategies in order to circumvent the technology or the measures that are put into place. On the contrary, of course, if we disclose the information, this may outright deter adversaries from attacking due to the measures that were invested in. By maintaining secrecy, the adversaries may not have proper information to plan a successful attack. And then this is kind of what I was getting at in the last slide, another big kind of negative that is taken into account if the government or, for instance, well, internationally, if security agencies decide to maintain secrecy, this of course could upset passengers. So if you're going through an airport checkpoint and there's something you weren't planning on doing or seeing, or if it's there for the first time, it could either be slowing your day or it's just an inconvenience to your life. A lot of people may not be happy about that, aside from the fact a lot of this stuff is, of course, purchased with our tax dollars. So this could be another issue in maintaining secrecy and not disclosing the technology that is being invested in at the government or aviation security level. So our approach in this work, and as I said, it is ongoing, so there's a couple of things in the end of this presentation that are not complete yet. But for the most part, we have a good chunk, about 95% of the work completed. So it is an attacker-defender environment, as I mentioned before. For the government, it's a two-stage discrete action where they can first choose to adopt or not adopt, and then disclose or not disclose. And then the adversary can, of course, choose to attack or not attack. One big thing in this work is, of course, when we find equilibrium solutions, we do know what the attacker would do, but the interest and what we will be focusing the most on the paper is actually the benefit or the preferable choice on the government or, well, yeah, the government side, the defender side. For the disclosure game, we model the sub-game as a dynamic game where the government moves first and the adversary moves second. Of course, this allows the adversary to have the complete knowledge of the adoption strategy. For the secrecy game, we model it as a static game. This is very synonymous with how it is modeled in the literature too, of course. This allows the government and adversaries to move not necessarily at the same time point, but it allows them to move without knowing the other's decision. And by the way, if anyone has a question as I'm going through, feel free to stop me. I have a tendency to talk fast, which is totally fine. Feel free to stop me, butt in, ask questions. That's totally okay with me. So here's the model. Some of the parameters on the left are actually for a subsequent model, which is not being presented today. So some of those parameters are not in line with the model you see on the right, but all of the parameters on the right are in the table on the left. So as I said first, the order of these doesn't matter as far as the solution procedure. So we only offer it this way to kind of make it a little simpler for the reader and the reviewers. So first, the government is choosing to disclose or not disclose, which is secrecy. And then after that, they are choosing to adopt or not adopt. And this is what I was just meaning when I said these two decisions can actually be reversed and the solution procedure is the same. So they can choose to adopt first and nothing changes. But either way, of course, they're either going to adopt or not adopt and disclose or not disclose. And after that, the attacker chooses to attack with some success probability, which is dependent on the adoption strategy taken by the government. So if the government does not adopt, of course, the probability of a successful attack will be a little bit higher. So yeah, and here's our solution procedure. So we first solve the disclosure subgame. We identify the subgame perfect Nash equilibria for that model, and then for the secrecy model, we do the same, find the Nash equilibria solutions. And this part, the number 3 and number 4 are kind of in progress right now. So we then compare the equilibrium solutions between the two subgames. And like I said, this is done subjectively at this point, but this is being done more technically as we speak. And then we identify and analyze the optimal policies for the government under different conditions. First, I'll go through the disclosure procedure for the disclosure model. So not that it means much as you're looking at the slide, but I thought I'd at least offer the objectives for both players. So both players are looking to maximize their expected utility. Of course, this can be negative, especially on the government side, seeing how they are either basically getting attacked or investing in the technology not to get attacked. So as far as the pure costs and benefits, I guess you could say, to the defender, they're mostly negative. So for this model, there are 4 pure SPNEs, subgame perfect Nash equilibriums. And yeah, those are the payoffs. I'm obviously not going to go through that because I know not many people care without seeing the actual data and the model itself and the solution procedure. So this is just some one-way sensitivity, and as some of you and some researchers in the field may know, one way does not always tell us the most. There is two-way done, but this is kind of the most simple, at least, to go through in a presentation like this. So I won't go through all these, but we do have baseline data from published reports and literature, which obviously really helps to support kind of the model and validate the results that we're getting out of it. So like I said, I'm not going to go through all these, but I will go through some kind of implications from the sensitivity and the model itself. So these are kind of, the first bullet point is kind of trivial, but it is definitely obviously good to know that the model performs in this way. So the government chooses to adopt technology for 2 main reasons at equilibrium. One of those is to, of course, deter the adversary from attacking. And the second is kind of due to our modeling structure, but to decrease the probability of successful attack. So as I mentioned before, when the government chooses to adopt, when the defender adopts technology, the probability of a successful attack decreases. So in this model at equilibrium, those two kind of cases hold true. An example of this is when the cost for the adversary to attack is low, he will always choose to attack at equilibrium, and therefore the government should adopt new technology in order to reduce the probability of a successful attack. Another kind of implication, which is also pretty trivial at this point, is of course, when the damage valuation to the government is low, and the damage valuation is basically what they forecast the damage to be or the cost to be on their end if there is a successful attack. So when that is low, and this could be potentially like at a small airport that they oversee, public airport that is, the government should not adopt, given that the assets that they protect at that airport, or, and it depends on the scenario, but the assets protected do not outweigh the direct cost of adoption and deployment. And as we kind of mentioned before, the deployment throughout all phases definitely is in the billions of dollars. Well, at least historically, it's been in the billions of dollars. And then the secrecy subgame is pretty similar. The only difference with this is that when the adversary moves, kind of in that second phase there, where there's the dashed line, he does not know the adoption strategy of the government. Henceforth, the secrecy kind of title we put on this. And in this game, in this model, we've only solved for pure national equilibrium right now. And actually what we're doing currently is also solving for the mixed. I'll kind of go over it later, but the literature out there right now that's in this domain usually does not look at mixed strategies, and if there is a pure strategy available. So we do want to kind of tackle that in our paper to kind of just offer the most comprehensive results that we can. So yeah, as you can see here, at least for the pure strategies, we do not have the optimal strategy or the equilibrium strategy of 1-0, which is when it's basically a deterrent. So that's when the government would adopt and the adversary would not attack at equilibrium. That is infeasible. And in game theory, basically, infeasibility is just due to conditions not being able to be satisfied. So yeah, of course, we have the sensitivity again. I won't go through all of this, but as I said before, there is only 3 equilibrium solutions, which definitely dramatically changes the sensitivity and also like the implications that we get from this model, which is also another motivating reason of why we want to get the mixed strategy, so we can compare, like I said, kind of compare comprehensively across the 2 models. So as I mentioned, the solution adopt, not attack is infeasible in this model. And kind of like I said, from the technical game theory point of view, this just means the conditions are not able to be satisfied. But from the more intuition-based kind of mindset, one possibility for this could be if the government does not expect the adversary to attack, which is kind of how we think about things in game theory, we refer to it as the best response. So if the government doesn't expect the adversary to attack, she will not adopt, obviously because the cost of adoption is not justified. And then some differences in the 2 models. The secrecy model, when the government switches her strategy from adopting to not adopting at much lower cost for adoption when we compare it to the disclosure model. And what we mean by this is, in the disclosure model, if the cost to adopt is basically medium to high, well, in some cases high, they will adopt the technology, but in the secrecy game, they will not. And this is because the adversary attacks at all values when the other parameters are constant. So all values of the adoption cost the adversary will attack at in the secrecy model. And this is actually pretty important, and this is kind of the motivation behind this work, is to get results like this that are insightful, not extraordinarily trivial. And this is just a couple of them. Like I said, I didn't want to go into the comprehensive kind of approach and solutions that we got here because it's still under construction on our end. And then another interesting one is when the adversary decides to attack, he attacks at much higher costs in the secrecy model. So the adversary is willing to endure a higher cost in order to attack in the secrecy model. And this is because the government does not adopt, and therefore the probability of successful attack remains higher when the adversary attacks at those higher costs. So his expected utility would be obviously higher and indeed maximized. So what we're doing right now, and the extensions that we will be undertaking when this is completed, and actually we're kind of working on this simultaneously. So as I said, right now we're solving for the mixed strategy national equilibriums in the secrecy game. Like I said, some key literature in this domain does not consider the mixed strategies when there are pure strategies that are feasible. And yeah, this is literally just due to the simplicity of the solution procedure. And also when you read papers in this domain, it's of course a little easier to explain like a binary case, either you adopt or not adopt, whereas a mixed strategy is basically when you put a probability distribution over the options. So for instance, the government, we don't know this for sure yet, but the government may choose to adopt with a certain probability at equilibrium, and the attacker could choose to attack with a certain probability, which obviously adds some randomness into the model. Well, not the model, but the solution space. And yeah, as I said, that we want to do that just to offer a more comprehensive analysis. And yeah, so on that aspect, that's kind of one of the last steps to this. And then the last step is just the formal model comparison, as I've touched on a few times here today. So that's basically the deliverable of this paper as far as the practical and the stakeholder side for us. The research obviously is new and we're happy about that, but at the end of the day, we do want to make sure this is helping the end user, which in this case is TSA. So we want to identify, we don't want to, we will identify when disclosure or secrecy is preferred by the defender based on the utility, their expected utility and the applicable conditions. So basically, like I said, the TSA wants to know when is disclosure or secrecy preferred. And when we formally compare these models and the solutions we obtain from the models, we will for sure be able to offer that. And as it says there, this is the final step for this paper. And then the next model, which we're actually working on now, is a signaling game. And in this game, also driven by stakeholder, I guess, curiosity, you could say, is this game focuses on private information for the defender. Basically, of course, when the government adopts technology, they do know the reliability or the effectiveness of the technology, so they will know 99% of the time if a attacker has a homemade explosive on their body that has metal components, they know 99% of the time the body scanner will detect that. So they do know this, but the adversary does not know this. So of course, this can significantly change the equilibrium solutions to our game. So we're currently modeling this private information for the defender through a signaling game where there's two defender types. One defender's type is an effective defender, the other one is a non-effective defender. So yeah, that is the current state of this work and a little bit of the future work. Another thing that I don't have noted here is our current model assumes, which is not necessarily a huge assumption, kind of based off of that picture that I showed in the beginning about how TSA tells us which locations they're deploying at. So currently we assume that the TSA will deploy their technology at major airports, international airports. And our assumption also states that the attacker is only interested in attacking airports that have that, basically that major airports. They're interested in attacking bigger airports where they'll get that big damage valuation, or where, of course, like international big flights are taking off of, and that's kind of what their interest was in previous cases such as 9/11 and other terrorist attacks such as that. So in the next model, we are looking at kind of like a risk-based allocation game where the defender has to choose which, obviously under a budget constraint, they have to choose which airports to adopt at. So that is not started yet, but that's just the next line of this research, and that's purely on the academic side. So yes, if there is, I believe that also the acknowledgement to DHS and the papers that are currently being written on our end. But if there are any questions, I'll be very, very happy to answer, or if there's any feedback or anything like that, I'm always happy to hear that as well. Like I said, a lot of this is a work in progress to an extent. So if there's any feedback, any value add to this project, I would be more than happy to hear that and take that back to my lab here at UB. Thanks a lot.
Awesome presentation. So are there any questions for Kyle?
I'm the same way. I stink at answering questions, but yeah, like I said, if anyone has a question about or even basic game theory, anything like that about this project, about pitfalls you find in the project, I'm more than happy to hear that feedback. I'm someone who takes it with a grain of salt and moves forward and ties it into my current work. So.
Sorry.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay, I have a basic question here about the collaboration with the TSA about, like, when you try to deliver the result in here, how would you go about explaining these technical details to them?
Yeah, so one thing that's actually nice about a lot of the agencies under DHS is they do have like data science teams, and they have some folks behind the closed doors who may not be expert, but they have definitely the education and the background understanding to kind of digest those details. But for the most part, it's our job to bring the science to more of a low level and a decision-making level for them. So when we present a lot of this, as far as the reports that go to them, a lot of that, like I said, has to be kind of more in layman's terms, like if this is happening, you should do this. And that's kind of one nice thing about the data that we have is it is practical in that sense, and it's easy to explain in that sense. But yeah, of course, as far as the technical details and especially the procedures that we took, at least for this first paper here, those things can be difficult to digest. And at least for me, I've learned that the hard way. But like I said, it is nice to have some collaboration in those agencies with people or individuals who do understand some of this, because they actually do. So they may not understand the game theory aspect, but they do understand the technical aspects as far as the analysis and the results. And there's actually been times where they've given us like pretty helpful feedback that has helped us to alter or refine the models. So I hope that answers the question, but it can be tricky.
Okay, great. Because sometimes it's not about coming up with the best model, it's about how to convey the other parties that what you're doing is actually worth it.
Yeah, and that's so true. And actually, like when we started this model, it was much more complex. And actually, the reason that you just stated is one reason we kind of didn't make the model simpler, but we kind of made it more generalizable, and that is one reason why kind of what you just pointed to there.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you.
Yep. Thanks for your question.
It was a nice presentation. I have two questions. One is, what is your assumption in terms of, do you have complete information or incomplete information to design these game models, game theory models? And the second question is, how do you evaluate your models?
Yeah, so those are both excellent questions. So the first part of that, what I presented today is complete information in the sense that in the disclosure game, the adversary knows what the defender has done in all details about those actions. And of course, the defender has knowledge about the attributes of the attacker. But of course, when there's in the secrecy subgame of this, of what I presented today, there is incomplete information in the sense that the adversary does not know what the government has done as far as adopting technology. But then as I mentioned in the last slide, our current work that we're simultaneously doing does take into account incomplete information in the sense that the defender has private information regarding the technical reliability of their new technology. And then the second question, so basically like validation, that kind of goes into the data, and that's like one of the really, I hate to say hard, but it can be tricky with game theory to get data that is, we will almost never get exact data, right? So we'll never get exact data for every single parameter in a model, but it can be tricky to estimate data in such a way that the results are easily explainable and also easy to validate on the side of the stakeholder. So in this case, TSA. So for the most part, what we've done is we have worked with actually the University of Albany, our collaborators there, our social scientists. So they have actually kind of refined the data for us for validation. And they are excellent in the fact that they can help us to validate our results with that data. So on that end, that for the stakeholder purpose, not the academic publication purpose, the stakeholder purpose, that is how we validate the models, and also how we kind of deliver the insights to the end user and say, hey, if this is going on, or in this scenario, this is your best option to disclose or not to disclose. And also, like, here are some of the trade-offs, not based on the model, but based on the historical events that have happened. For instance, like I said, people may get mad if the government maintains secrecy, which has happened. So that's kind of how we go about that. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. Also, you are working on comparison of your model with previous model in the literature.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yep, thank you.
You also talked about utility, so I assume that that you're making the decisions based on expected utility of the attacker and defender, right?
Yep.
But so that makes things even more difficult. You know, the data problem is an issue, but then you're developing a utility function based on data that are, you know, may not be quite so reliable.
Yep.
So how are you assessing utility?
So, I mean, basically, like the model as it stands now, like you said, is basically both players are looking to maximize their expected utility. But it's kind of like that can kind of be like one of the trickier things, I guess. That's probably why you asked the question, but that can kind of be one of the trickier things is like how to evaluate that. Of course, like as far as the technical like details of utility, they're just derived directly from my model. But as far as knowing how accurate they are, that's kind of where the partnership with UAlbany has helped us a lot to kind of like validate, like, okay, like in this case, they're making this action. Well, obviously because that's maximizing the utility. And if that doesn't make sense, that means something's wrong with our utility function. So that's kind of like, at least for this, is kind of how we've like gone back and forth to not solve that issue, but definitely like address it as far as we can.
Okay, anyone else? Well, Kyle, thanks so much, and best of luck on the rest of your research and rest of your time at Buffalo, and we'll probably see you around at Inforums.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time too. I appreciate it, everybody.
Yeah, thanks. And come back next week. We've got another speaker lined up. It looks like, and she's actually in the room. She's from the University of South Florida. She'll be speaking next Wednesday at noon Central. So we'll see you all then. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.